So I absolutely love my Christmas tree. I mean, I love it. I just love the ornaments. I love the lights. I love the little bows. But as our kids were growing up, I had a Christmas tree rule. And the rule was you could only put on a certain kind of Christmas ornaments. The rule was you could only have Disney ornaments, or you could have peanut ornaments. You could have no other ornaments. The only flexibility I had at all was the one Grinch ornament. That was it. Everything else had to be Disney or it had to be Peanuts characters. So after I became a grandparent, a funny thing happened to that rule. Suddenly, I started to flex the rule a little bit. And soon, showing up on my little Christmas tree was Spider-Man ornaments and Pikachu. Yes, that's right. Pokemon ornaments started to populate my tree. You know, it's funny what happens to us as we age. And that's kind of what happened to me, I think. As I aged and I softened and the grandkids came into my life, suddenly I got a little loose with the rules on the Christmas tree ornaments. But the funny thing that happened, and actually, let me just say it's not a funny thing, it turned into kind of a sad thing for me, was that after I allowed the Pokemon and the Spider-Man ornaments to come onto the tree, my kids reminded me of that really harsh rule I had. In fact, it was so harsh that it made them really sad that they couldn't put up their little homemade ornaments that they made at school or at church or something like that. Now, I let them put them up around the house, and so I thought that was good enough. But as evidently, because I didn't allow them on this beautiful tree, it hurt their feelings. I didn't mean to hurt their feelings. But what I realized was I was trying to control the tree. You see, I don't do this with a lot of things, but I really wanted this tree to be that kind of special tree. And I really thought that the kids were kind of into it. In fact, I know that these ornaments that are on this tree are now the covenant item that Melanie and I have, that eventually the kids are going to fight over who gets to have these ornaments. But at the time, my controlling the tree was a source of hurt. And I didn't mean it. But sometimes that's the way things are when we want to control things. Well, I was thinking about that whole issue of control, and it reminded me of how the Christmas story begins. Now, we know that Mary was told by an angel that she was going to have a child, but we also know that she wasn't married to Joseph at the time, which brought up all kinds of issues, right? And then we hear this particular story right when Jesus is born. It goes like this. It says, "In those days a decree went out from Emperor Augustus that the world should be registered. This was the first registration and was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. All went to their own towns to be registered. Joseph went from the town of Nazareth to Galilee, to Judea, to the city of David called Bethlehem, because he was a descendant from the house and the family of David. He went to register with Mary, whom he was engaged and who was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for them to deliver her child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in bands of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no place for them at the inn." Now, for us, that story looks like a beautiful story, right? It's a beautiful story, and as we tell it often on Christmas Eve, it is this beautiful story. But let me tell you, it was not what Mary and Joseph had planned. It was not how they would have wanted to control the situation. I mean, if Joseph had his way, Mary wouldn't be pregnant before they were married. If Mary had her way, they wouldn't have had to travel all that great distance to Bethlehem from Nazareth, quite a long distance. They would not have had to do that when Mary was 9 months pregnant. And for both of them, if they had any kind of control over the situation, their firstborn son would not be laid in a feeding trough as a crib because they didn't have any place to stay inside the inn. There is nothing that the Holy Family was in control of. And yet, we are blessed by their lack of control. Because oftentimes, God guides what we feel is incontrollable. And no one should ever attempt to play God. Not even a dad who wants only peanuts and Disney ornaments on his tree. You know, oftentimes we don't feel like we're in control. And maybe that's okay, because too often than not, our control can end up hurting more than it can helping.